So our charge with this professional learning community was to begin to think about the professional programs that we offer on campus, and there are a range of them, not only education, which is what I represent, but business and physical therapy and public health, nursing. How many of you are in a program like that? A professional training program? Okay. So we asked you all to sit over here, is that right? In the back row. And our charge was to begin to look at those programs and to see what was going on in terms of the preparation of in ethics for those students, and if there was something that needed to be done to upgrade it. So the three of us are representative of that group, and I'm going to talk about the School of Education, what the School of Education has done over the last several years. We actually, okay, let me just start off this way. It is no secret that generally when there are major ethical violations in education, it makes the front page of the newspaper. This is actually the front page of the New York Times on April 1st of this year, so 2 weeks ago. And I would like to introduce you to David Bullock. It's him right here. He has got his hands behind his back because he's being carted off to jail. He is from Atlanta, and he was a testing and you have no music.
Jazz coming out.
Yeah, really. Background jazz.
I'll try to solve that problem. Sorry, that problem. Somehow iTunes opened. Isn't that nice?
It is very nice.
Yeah.
Very comforting. Okay. So, David Bullock is a former Atlanta testing court administrator. He's being led to a holding cell. He was convicted along with 11 other people. There were actually 12 people in this trial being tried for changing test scores. And how many of you have heard of this case? Okay, so they changed test scores, and they did that so that the student scores would increase, and they did that because Atlanta was offering incentives for teachers and administrators who made remarkable progress on student tests. I was looking today, I just happened to hear it on the news this morning as I was coming in. Today there was going to be a sentencing hearing, so I was going to report to you what they had been. They faced all of these 11 out of 12 were convicted. The 12th was the superintendent, and she died in last year, so she wasn't part of it. So all of them were convicted. Excuse me. And they were facing up to 20 years. And that apparently now, today, there was a hearing, and the judge stopped the hearing until next Tuesday so we can get the results in a week from tomorrow. And he's asking them to take a plea bargain so that there's not going to be another trial. So you hear about cases like this. These are some local cases that were reported recently in the Fresno Bee. If you get to Fresno Bee, you probably heard about them. Former Clovis teacher accused of having sex with a student knows what he did was wrong. And a more recent case, a middle school principal in town. I don't like black kids. How many of you saw that video or read something about it? So it's these kinds of issues, and there are many more related to the treatment of children that never get reported, that we would like to make our students aware of, and in terms of their professional obligations. And we've been at this in the School of Education for a long time, actually, in perhaps a limited way. We've had a full-day conference for all of our teacher candidates emphasizing character education and professional ethics since 1985. How many of you in here are education students? And how many of you, those of you who are education students, did your credential program here as well? So all of you, I'm assuming, came through after 1985. None of you look old enough to, probably most of you were born after 1985, maybe not, but you probably went to that. And each year we've been making progressive push to do a better job with professional ethics. We've been doing, recognizing schools for their efforts in character education by giving them awards. These are schools throughout the valley. If any of you are interested in any of this, I have a very limited time, and I'll be happy to discuss it with you later. But we have an award program. We've been doing that for character education in the schools since 1988. At about 6 years ago, we started doing a formal induction into the profession. Medicine has a Hippocratic oath. We now have a formal induction ceremony with our own affirmation statement that we've been using to try to get the students to understand what their ethical responsibilities are. And as a result of this faculty learning community, we've been holding regular discussions of professional ethics dilemmas in each phase. We have 3 phases in our program, and particularly in the last 2 phases when more students are out in schools actually teaching. So let me just highlight some of those. Our Character Education Awards program that's been going on for 20 years, these are 2 of the questions that schools have to respond to in their application. Describe how character education is addressed. Specifically, our character education topics addressed as separate units of study in the core content area, or are they infused throughout the curriculum, which is what we'd like to have happen. And then particularly this one, describe how adults at your school, teachers and classified staff promote and model fairness, equity, caring, and respect for others. Basic ethical principles of interacting with others. So we ask the schools to describe that, and then we visit them. Our induction each year, these are 2 of the points in our affirmation. We ask, I'll let you read those, but what we do is we ask the students to affirm this at the time of their induction, and then 3 semesters later when we have graduation, which will now be this May, they get a formal plaque with this on it, signed by the dean, saying this is what you affirmed to 3 semesters ago, and this is what we're holding you responsible for. But 2 of those points are dedicating themselves to the cultivation of character and principles related to ethical and academic excellence, and that they realize that their own behavior is the model for students. Since this group has met, we have now been meeting. The School of Education now has several ethical, large-scale, actually large group, ethical dilemma discussions with students, and with questions like the Atlanta dilemma about cheating. Suppose you knew that a fellow teacher was cheating on something and they were really doing it for the right reasons, so that school wouldn't be embarrassed and the teachers wouldn't be fired. Would you report your colleague or not? And it's surprising what people say. Many of them wouldn't, and it's a scary thing to do. We asked them more simple dilemmas, particularly for first semester student teachers. If you walk into the campus and your school has a dress code and you don't like it, you say, nobody can tell me how to dress. What's dress got to do with teaching anyway? What do you do? And we have some resolutions to that, but those are the kinds of dilemmas that are discussed, and we're trying to infuse ethical dilemma discussions more into the various programs, both at our credential levels and at our graduate levels. This is really important. We had well, I'll come back to that, I guess. I feel that we need to do more. Half of the credential program in the School of Education is field-based. And So our people are, after a semester or two, are spending huge amounts of time in the public schools dealing with children, sometimes supervised, sometimes not supervised. And we should be devoting much more time to discussion of their ethical obligations. And at the same time, we should be devoting the time we need to make sure that academic achievement is being promoted. We have a large graduate program, but unless a particular professor is interested in the ethics of school administration, for example, it's not a systematic thread in the program. We should be doing that. I would like to see a much greater emphasis on this campus on academic integrity. We have how many of you are familiar with the fact that we do have a code of ethics, a code of conduct on the campus? It shows up actually, it's supposed to show up on every single one of your syllabi. So if it's not there, you might look for it, and if it's not, you should ask for it. I think we should do this as a campus because of who we are, what we represent in the Valley, and I think schools need to do a much better job of this in discussing. Anybody in here a teacher? Great. Okay. Oh, a lot of you are teachers. In your faculty meetings, these kinds of issues are generally, I mean, I know this for a fact, are not generally discussed. And they ought to be discussed. You shouldn't gossip. We tell student teachers, stay out of the faculty lounge because there's nothing but gossip going on there. Sometimes I guess that's true, but not always. But certainly at a formal meeting, it would be helpful on a regular basis to have more discussions about issues impinging on the profession. So that's the kinds of things we're involved in the School of Education. Turn it over to you. Oh, am I turning over to Kat?
Hello and welcome. My name is Kara Zagrafis.
Oh.
Did you want to talk about that?
No, I just said the final picture.
So I'm Kara Zagrafis, and I'm a professor in public health, and I also direct our Masters of Public Health program. And so I'm going to talk with you today about how we integrate ethics into our curriculum for our master's students. And basically it's integrated into 3 of our courses. And just to give a little history on our program, it's a 3-year program, and the students enter in cohorts. And so they go through the curriculum together during those 3 years. And so this first course, where they first get introduced to ethical concepts, is during the first year in the program. And during this course, it's basically an introduction to ethics and definition of terms. And I talk with the students about why we even need to study ethics in our field. And the main reason is we are public health professionals, and as such, we are involved with community and people a lot. And so ethical things come up, and we need to be able to handle them. And so we also talk a little bit about some of the theories involved with ethics that are basically broken down into 2 categories. The first one is looking at, if we take lying, for example, if there's ever a time where it is not okay to lie, like lying is 100% not okay, versus the teleological one, which is it's okay to lie if the outcome is good. And so I often tell students, have any of you lied before to a friend? And have any of you lied to anyone? And they're like, well, yeah, but it was okay because the outcome was to protect them. And so we kind of talk about that in the class as well. And then we go through ethical decision making. And there are a number of guides that are used to make ethical decisions, but the one we use is a 10-step guide. And it basically starts with identifying the problem or the ethical dilemma, and then thinking about the courses of action that you can take, looking at how those courses of action would affect society, how they affect the person and their own personal values and beliefs, and then we end with the actual decision itself. And oftentimes in class I'll tell the students, you know, we can look at these different dilemmas, and in class it's really easy to say, well, that's the right thing to do, or that's the wrong thing to do. But when you're actually faced with it, and in that situation, it's not always so clear. So we do talk about that as well. And then, in our field of public health, we have a code of ethics that's specific to public health. And so there are 6 articles associated with this code of ethics. The first article is related to responsibility to the public. And so as health educators, we are responsible for promoting, maintaining, and improving health. And that's the health of individuals and health of the community. And then the next one is looking at responsibility to the profession. And this is looking at ensuring ethical behavior, not just of yourself, but also of colleagues that you work with, because that affects the entire profession. And then the next one is looking at responsibility to employers. And this is looking at the boundaries of our competence. So for example, being aware of what we are able to do within our profession and what we're not able to do. So for example, my students, I often tell them, you're a health educator, so you do health education. So that means you can't do anything clinical. So if you're in a hospital setting, that means you're doing the education piece. You're not doing any of the clinical work that a physician would do. And I often use the example of myself as one of the advisors in our department. Oftentimes students will come in for academic advising, and then by the end of the conversation, they're talking about other stuff outside of academics, like home problems or financial problems, and it's okay for me to listen to that. But as an ethical person in my field, I can't go beyond and say, okay, now I'm a psychologist, and I'm going to help them in that sense, right? So then I refer them out. And that's dealing with being confident, knowing here are the boundaries of what I'm practicing. The next one is responsibility in the delivery of health education, which is basically respecting the rights and dignity of people, respecting confidentiality. And then the last part about meeting people's needs. We work with a very diverse group of people, and so really assessing those needs and doing programs that are designed to meet them. Responsibility in research and evaluation. This is contributing to the field of public health. So let's say, for example, a person does like a health education program and they analyze the results of that program. Contributing to the field would mean that they then present those results or share the results with the community. And then the last one deals with professional preparation. And that is that the other part of ethics is that in order to be ethical in our practice, we have to stay up to date on information. And so I tell my students, you're students now, and you'll be students forever. Because in our field, like many of your fields probably, you have to stay current on things. And then the next thing we do is the second year in the program. In one of the classes, they work together in small groups, and they basically talk about scenarios for actual case studies dealing with ethics. And the first example is if you're working and your supervisor and you are working on a grant together that's been funded, and you notice that your supervisor has diverted the funds of the grant to a personal account, what do you do? And I always tell them, it's kind of hard because you're the health educator, and who is diverting the funds? Someone who is above you, your supervisor. And so how do you deal with that? The second scenario is if a health educator has analyzed their data and they realize that they have not reached their program goals and objectives. So here they are looking at their data, and they're seeing that maybe they fell short in some areas with the program. And I tell them, when you're analyzing your data, there may be no one there with you. And so you may have a tendency to think, okay, well, if I just make it look like this, or if I do that, no one will know. And I tell them, no one else may know, they may not catch it, but who knows? You know. And that should be enough in itself, right? And so that's another example. And then the last one is dealing with a health educator who is working in a program that's designed for safer sex practices among homosexuals. And what happens is as the health educator is given this responsibility to do, they realize they aren't comfortable talking about these practices. I think it was HIV/AIDS, and they aren't comfortable working with this population. And so one of the things that happens in the beginning of this course is they write a philosophy statement, basically saying what their personal goals and values are and how they relate to the job they want to do one day. And so I take them back back to this example during this activity and I tell them, if your personal values and beliefs are not congruent with your job, it's going to be a rough road, right? So you want to make sure that where you're working is really congruent to how you feel. And so that's the example that we do for that. And then the last area where they get ethics, and this is where they kind of do like more practical experience, is our students do either a thesis or a project. And each student has to submit an application to IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board, for approval before they collect or analyze any of their data. And so typically, the student is on a committee with 3 other faculty members, and the faculty help them to prepare this application. And so I kind of put the parts of the application that are required, and I'll kind of summarize some of them. Basically, there's an abstract, which is just a summary of the application. The protocol is the most significant part of the application. And in that, you have a purpose background section, which is basically describing the research, providing a little background on the topic, and then ending with your research questions or hypotheses. There's a discussion on the subjects in the research. So this would involve how many people are you going to be studying? How are these people going to be recruited? The methods section, which is basically the procedures behind their research. And this section needs to be particularly detailed. I usually tell the students that that section should be so detailed that someone else could pick it up and do your procedure for you. Because that's an area that is really, really looked at by the committee. Then there should be a discussion on the benefits of the research, benefits to your participants and maybe also to larger society. Discussion on any risks associated with the research. In our field, there doesn't tend to be a lot of risk because most of what we do is education. But in some other fields, there might be, like in biology, there are some risks. In nursing, we have some risks associated with their research. And if risks are identified, there has to be a discussion on how they are managed. A section on whether or not subjects are going to be compensated for being in your research. Academic qualifications of your committee members and yourself. The consent form, which is basically outlining the entire protocol, and then people sign it to say, okay, I want to participate in this research. Instruments need to be included, and what those are is if you're doing a program, and let's say you have a survey that you're doing, a copy of those questions have to be included. And oftentimes my students will say, well, I don't have that ready yet. And then I'll tell them, well then let's wait, you're not ready for this step yet, because the people who review this, they want to know what you're asking the participants. That's part of protecting those human subjects. And then the last thing is our students have to attend a training. This one is actually online that we do. It's through the NIH, and they have to be certified to conduct research with human subjects. Thank you.
Thanks for staying until my part. It's usually very hard to stay after 5. So my name is Rupinder Singh. I'm a professor in physical therapy. I teach in the graduate program. Some students sitting back there. Thanks for your support for coming. And I do research. I direct a biomechanics lab. So I think part of this ethics center I got involved was to look at clinic, because I'm a physical therapist and I know what are some of the challenges in the clinic, but I'm also a professor doing research, so I can connect with some of the challenges in IRB, how to deal with some of the situations when you're doing research. So I'm going to kind of break it down into research and clinics. So let's see. The first challenge is to get this to work. We got it. So as Kara said, the ethics committee, so you can think of IRB as the police or the cops for research. This is our duty to make sure that all the research done is ethical. And for students who are undergraduates still thinking to take on graduate programs and do research, I can promise you every project, if it's even looking at height and weight of some kids to see how their growth patterns, even that small amount of human data has to be approved by IRB. job of the IRB is to see the risks of a study. For example, if you're looking at something where we're testing a medication on someone who has a heart attack, obviously there are risks because the medication doesn't work, the guy has a heart attack and he passes away, it's a problem. But the IRB committee has to decide, are the risks minimal enough for the study to carry on? And good news is there is a very strong IRB. Sorry, question.
The IRB, is it made up of professors here at Fresno State?
Yes. So IRB actually, we have a human subjects IRB committee here on campus. It's headed by different professors from different colleges. But the cool thing about Fresno State is each department has an IRB committee and has an IRB chair. For example, I am the IRB chair of physical therapy. So any research that is going to come through physical therapy has to be screened by me first, and then it will be taken to the next level for university approval. So each department has one already in place. If we have IRB, then we have to talk about ethics. So a lot of this information in the slides I put together from my personal experiences. So feel free to debate. Don't fight with me. Let's debate on it. So first thing, I usually personally divide them into 3 topics. Is it legal? Yes, it has to be legal for research to be conducted. Is it balanced? Are we biased towards one particular individual or one particular outcome? Or the most important one for me is how does it make you feel? And as Kara was saying, or Jack mentioned the example of the people increasing the scores to match our program outcomes. Cool, no one would know. Maybe you can do it after office hours and just secretly change that 89 to 93. But how does that make you feel? So I'm going to talk about that third bullet point a little bit more in detail later in the lecture. Because I'm going to focus on professional ethics, all of the professions, to my knowledge, have a professional ethics code of conduct. Because I'm a physical therapist, just took a snapshot of APTA, which is the American Physical Therapy Association. They have a brief code of ethics, like 2 pages. Most professions have, like engineering will have a code of ethics where they will tell the engineers who are certified not to charge thousands of dollars for making a measuring stick. Or healthcare would have a code of ethics telling people what to do dealing with patients. In education, there's a code of ethics how to deal with particular problems. In addition to professional ethics, a lot of programs have core values, like physical therapy has core values of trust, making sure there's integrity in the treatment, personal values are taken care of, and everyone, including Coke as a professional. So they have, I looked it up last night, they have like 60 pages of professional ethics for their employees to be followed. And as Kara talked about some of the examples she talks in class, so I thought I'll just put it out to you or see what we think as a group on one of the recent studies. It has a research corrector to it. So 2 professors in Fresno State are planning to collect data on female subjects 18 to 25-year-old, and they want to look at back problems as well as palpating the back of their shoulder. The IRB application comes to me. It's listed that the professors are qualified. All the things, including the consent forms, are completed. There is a small flag. The student they hired to collect the data is a 24-year-old male. And the protocol is such, based on my PT knowledge, that they're going to have very minimal clothing when they're trying to test the low back and the shoulder. So my first question to you is, do you think it's ethical to approve the study? You can either shake your head or raise your hand. Either way works for me. That's a vote. That's a good idea. Are we doing the heads down and raising the hand up, or can we just have raise of hands? So people who think I should approve this study, please raise your hands. Of course, the doctoral student sitting at the back said yes, because they want to graduate and get done with it. And the second question is, let's say I have to approve it. are there particular recommendations or suggestions you would give to the professors?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, so you have to make sure they're following the code of ethics. So for example, if that male student has to collect data and palpate the back of a girl, he should definitely be courteous and make sure that he's not breaking any rules. One of the suggestions would be for one of the professors to be in that room, those are females, and make sure the subject who agrees for the study knows that that would be a potential risk or a procedure that she will have to go through to make sure it's not any harm, that there's no physical harm in it, but there's no emotional strain on that subject, because in theory the subject who's going to do the study is going to help with the research. So maintaining the code of ethics is very important in that particular case. Then I'm going to shift a little bit to the clinical part of it. As I said, it's very important for me to see what it means. So for students who are going to go into clinical or are already into clinical education, it's very important of how you see it yourself. So if you made a mistake, during my student days, I had a patient where they wanted some heat therapy on their back, and I just asked her, I said, can I put heat? And she's like, yeah, sure. So I put down that really hot pad on her back. She didn't say anything, but for like weeks on, I kept on thinking, what happens if she got a burn? What happens if she got a burn? I should have told the supervisor, and that's an ethic. I did tell her, say I probably might have burned that patient, and she got a little mad. She's like, oh, I don't think so. We don't generate so much heat in our hot pads that will burn the skin, but thanks for letting me know. So I think at the end of it, it's how you feel about it, and it's the same with any profession. It doesn't have to be physical therapy or public health or nursing. Even with education, or if you're dealing in a professional world with a client, you probably need to tell them the truth. Make sure you feel good at the end of it when you think about it again. These are some of the lists I've included, especially for students targeted who are planning to go into professional fields, graduate programs, of some of the things which I have learned from experience. First thing I really want to stress is please make eye contact. Please don't call people into your office and reply to the professors. Don't just say, hey, welcome, how are you? Let me just check this text here. What brings you here? How's your weekend? I think we have to make sure both the old and the young generation doesn't fall into this trap of not making eye contact. I know we can make excuses that, oh, I was documenting what she was saying. No, that's not true. Please, the non-verbal communication, I think it's part of some of the unofficial ethics we need to train. And eye contact to me is one of the best examples, is you need to show your patient, show your client that you're respecting their time and you are paying attention to what they're saying. Don't tell them if they don't, if you don't know. If someone asks me what's the best way to go to Barstow from here, and if I'm new to campus, I shouldn't be like, oh, go that way. Or people coming to ED 140, if you don't know where to enter, just don't give wrong directions. Same thing, if a patient asks you and say, hey, I think my doctor said I had cancer, don't just start on your cancer specialty, or as Kara said, don't start being a psychologist and explaining them how to do personal problems. I think it's very difficult for new graduates, but it's very important to start referring things which you don't know. Be a life learner. I think most of the professional programs need current licensure, and you have to keep learning. You have to be a student for life. And I love the last one, which is kind of modified from the code of ethics, is like, help the community because they'll help you eventually. Don't just think of money always. Have an event. Bring everyone over and say, we're going to talk about health issues or educational issues. Because if they like you, guess what? The powerful word of mouth advertisement is going to go around, and you're going to be like, that is the coolest person I've ever heard. Please go back to him. It is building a relationship with your patient. It's building a relationship with your clients, but you can only do that after they trust you. If they say, I don't know what this guy is telling, I looked it up and it was not true, they're probably not going to come back to you again. So building a trust is very important. As with public health or other schools, we also have a professional school curriculum. We have a DPD program with a 3-year cohort, and we try to embed the whole program with professional ethics. But, if the last 4 can close your ears for a minute, you won't listen to what I'm saying. I figured out sometimes it's just too late. They are grown-up individuals. They have gone through all the rigors to go to PT school. They have huge GPAs at undergrad level. And when you start to tell them some of these things, like eye contact and stuff, it's just too late for them to change habits. So I agree, curriculum should be here, and it's very solid year 1, year 2 program. But some of the ethics need to be forever. They are not just going to be for the 2 years they're going to have their education. There are obviously books. I just took a snapshot of the one for nursing. It's commonly used. And guess what? We have apps. How many of you have used ethical apps? Good. All right. See, all of you have iPads and smartphones. So you can go to the Google store if you're an Android user or Apple and look for code of ethics. And guess what? People are making money out of it. So imagine the number of nurses in the United States, and if a hospital says, oh, let's use this, you can actually use an app where the app will tell you, based on all the information that's embedded in the app, if it's an ethical decision, yes or no, and it will take you through the steps. I have mixed feelings about apps. I'm very glad the next presenter is going to talk about apps, but I think an important distinction here is there are apps on code of ethics and professions, but there are apps on ethical decision making, which might not have anything to do with the profession. It just could be, I took dad's car and I consumed 13 gallons of fuel and it's not empty. Should I tell dad that I used it, or let him figure out, and if he's mad, maybe he's in a good mood, maybe he'll fill the tank. So it can take you through. The snapshot is from Maricula Center. I think they're from Santa Clara. They made headlines in all the big newspapers in 2014, start of the year, where they advertised very heavily about ethical decision-making apps. So I think I'm going to turn it over to the next presenter, Kat, and she's going to talk about pros and cons of apps. Thank you.
So this is Dr. Kat Piacindo. Kat, are you there?
Yes, I am. The phone connection going to work, Carlos?
Is this going to work?
Can
Yes.
you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think we can hear you.
You see a right commercial, so you know. Okay, can I go for you?
Hold your breath. Yes.
Okay, here we go. So I have little captions there, so in case they cannot hear me. And I did spell development. I do realize when I pulled it up today was spelled remember with a I'm working with a micro keyboard that's on battery, my batteries are dying, and so my spelling was not really up to good. That one word I didn't touch. In any case, and now we're talking about the app and also simulations and the comparisons. Applications, as you were just introduced to in the last PowerPoint, are useful if you have no idea where to go with the information. You're a quandary as to how to choose. But there are some good points and bad points about applications. Next slide, please.
Yes.
And this is what we just saw at the end of the last presentation. And as I have in the little caption bubble, simplifies how to be ethical, right? Would the audience agree that this would make choosing ethics easier? Do we have a depth for show of hands of the audience?
Okay, so repeat the question.
Would this actually, choosing something like this, make it easier to be ethical?
How many of you think this would, using an app like this would make it easier to become ethical? It was almost unanimous with 2 half votes and about 50 people saying no.
Most people say no then?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. Go to the next one then. All right, hold on. The problem behind the app.
Did you say go to the next slide?
Yeah. We're there?
Yes.
Does the digital Jimmy cricket effect, Jimmy cricket from Pinocchio, people don't know, he was Pinocchio's conscience on the old Disney movie. But you see the idea there, that may diminish our ability to make just decisions. The comic shows the man listening to his phone. And Aristotle says there's something called phronesis, which means we need to look at the context which a decision is made. And if we use acts, we're outsourcing our morality. We don't really think about ethics anymore. Next slide, please. Are we there?
Yes.
Thank you. And this is an alternative. There are many simulations that are available now that actually put you in a VR situation and teach you how to develop better ethics. The research on this proves that these simulations are very effective in inducing people that have higher moral ethics controls. And of course, the caption box says, which would you choose to develop? You know, here you keep control versus the digital app, Jimmy Cricket app, kind of takes control away from you. Now, I don't know, we don't have time looking at time. I'll not let you click on the first one, Quandary, and it takes you into a little tour of it, but we don't have time for that, do we?
No.
No, I didn't think so, but maybe we can ask people if they want, put their names on a list. I'll send them out a copy of this if they want to play those 2 games. This is really good.
But they can go to www.quandarygame.org.
Yeah, well, I'm saying if they put their name on a list, Jeff, you can get the list. I'll send them out that PowerPoint.
Okay, we'll make a list.
Yeah, if anybody wants to go to the site. Next slide, please.
Okay.
And you see the idea here is that ethics is really a developmental aspect. And we're saying that all professions developmentally continue to grow in their ethics if we provide the opportunity, which obviously the School of Public Health is doing now, the other schools are doing physical therapy and School of Ed. But we need to really emphasize this lifelong through someone's career. And then a way to end and think ethically, last slide, please.
Yes.
And people can read this for themselves, these are kind of ethical, tongue-in-cheek definitions. And I'm sure most people would laugh at this a little bit, but that's the whole idea. We have ethics, so we can laugh at this. We understand ethically what this means. And that's the end of Ask and Sit, so we have time for questions.
Thank you.